everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Stonebelt ARC's Bridging the Purpose Gap, Disability and Vocation webinar. You'll hear more about our speakers here in a moment, but just to get us started and to note a few things, let's go on to this. Let's go into this slide. For those of you who may not know and may be new to these webinars, I am Sarah McKenney. I am the Spiritual Support Coordinator for Stonebelt ARC. Stonebelt is a service provider organization in Bloomington, Indiana. And it looks like my slides are automated, so bear with me. So we are a service provider in Bloomington, Bedford, and Columbus, Indiana. And we are, so we provide a variety of different services to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Anything from residential support services to job coaching to spiritual support. And one of the things that we're trying to do is to offer these webinars to all of you. Some of you are from congregations, some of you are from a variety of different locations and situations. Our webinars are being recorded. We have several years now under our belt, so you can check out those webinars in our webinar library on our website, and you will also get that in our I'll put that in the chat here in a few minutes, so you can also look at that library. Let's see. So yeah, as you can see, our next webinar is in July. We will have Reverend Lisa McKee and Reverend Lisa Heffernan, and they're going to be talking about people with disabilities in congregational leadership, and also maybe some challenges that come along with that, and what the two of them have learned through some of that process. Well, let's go ahead and move to our Zoom instructions. Many of you are familiar with Zoom, but I know settings change depending on the situation and circumstance. So your mics are muted. I ask you to feel free to put in the chat box who you are, where you're from, why you're here today. And then also go ahead and put any questions that you have throughout the webinar, but we will get to those questions toward the end, and we'll get those questions answered. Closed captioning is available. You can just click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And please let me know if you have any questions, and I will try and answer those tech questions as we go. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce to you our speakers for today. Dr. Daniel Aaron Harris. Daniel identifies with cerebral palsy, is a native to Memphis, and he is an artist, author, actor, activist, and ministerial leader of his own. He just earned his doctorate of ministry in disability and ministry, focusing on disability and vocation at Western Theological Seminary. He is director and founder of Fallen Walls, and he's been director and founder for 21 years, where he encourages people and helps people find their vocation inside their location, regardless of their ability. He is author of over 9 children's books in a series called Bobby Blue Books, and those can be found on Amazon, and I'll show you some more information here in a second. Other writings include articles, and he is also involved, he's also written a play that helps to change the narrative of disability. He is an active member of a theater group and actually has a play coming up. and is then also involved in a film community in Memphis. Here are some of his books that you can find on Amazon. You can also go to his website, DanielAaronHarrisCreates.com, and you'll also find links on his website to Amazon where you can buy his numerous children's books. And then our second speaker is Dr. Benjamin Connor. He is the director of the Center of Disability and Ministries at Western Theological Seminary. The center exists to support ministry leaders of all abilities in nurturing and receiving the gifts and contributions of persons with disabilities through formational opportunities, including theological education, consultation, forums, publications, and so on. Dr. Connor has served with Young Life, including working with Capernaum. Young Life's work with youth and with disabilities, and serving on the Capernaum's mission-wide committee. He is author of several books, including Amplifying Our Witness, Giving Voice to Adolescents with Developmental Disabilities, and Disabling Mission, Enabling Witness, Exploring Missiology Through the Lens of Disability Studies. And I'll show you some photos of and images of those two books, if that helps. You can find these on Amazon as well. He is also an occasion horse leader, sidewalker, stall mucker, and general support for his wife, Melissa, who runs Renew Therapeutic Writing Center. And these are just some of those books that I just mentioned. And again, you can find those on Amazon. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Ben Connor and Dr. Daniel Aaron Harris.
Hello, glad to be with you today. I'm going to go first and sort of set up the conversation, and then Daniel will take it from there. And I'm excited to hear what Daniel has to say, so I'm going to try to get my part out of the way. I'm just setting up the conversation. So vocation, what is vocation? And I understand this is a interreligious and interdenominational group of interest here, and so I want to make sure I'm speaking to all of that. So vocation just comes from the Latin vocare, means call. And the question is, where is this call coming from for you? The image is someone walking on a beach in a labyrinth, and I'm imagining this is a time of discernment for this individual. Vocation for many people is just an anxiety-provoking word. We think about vocation and it's this big, frightening thing that's in front of us when we're young and we're being trained for something. And what's communicated the whole time is that we don't have a vocation yet. We're going to get some sort of training, have some sort of expertise, some sort of education, some sort of internship, at which point we will have a vocation. So children haven't always been thought of as having a vocation. Young people are told to wait and develop and learn and train to have a vocation. And then there's like this sweet spot where you have a vocation, which is basically equivalent in this paradigm or way of understanding. It's your job. And then when you retire, you have a whole nother crisis, because all of your energy and identity has been tied into this vocation or calling or job. And now you don't have that anymore. So the two most stressful times are adolescence and retirement in terms of vocation, because it's in those times where we're feeling the most unsettled and the most anxiety. And I wonder if that's your experience with vocation. And if it is, then it's probably because like me, before I start studying vocation, you have this idea of the vocation as a noun. It's this great big thing that's in front of you. we need to have different language about vocation. And a gentleman named Frederick Buechner wrote in his book, Wishful Thinking, that vocation is the place where our deep gladness meets the world's deep need. There's another way of getting at this idea of calling, that the world's need is calling to you, and that your own interests and desires are calling to you, whether you frame it in terms of religion or not. For me, my calling, I understand it as being a call from God. As a Christian, I have a primary vocation. The call was to Jesus to follow me, and the calls to participate in God's ongoing creative and redemptive work in the world. That's a Christian interpretation. You can have a vocation. You don't have to have that framework. At some point, you are looking at your life, your gifts, your passions, your desires, and you're looking at the world's needs, and you're saying, how do I connect to that in a meaningful way, in a way that gives my life meaning? So a calling orients us. It orients us. It helps us make sense of all the other things that we're doing. And it's not just one thing, although there's usually a dominant sense of calling, but you're called in many different roles, in many different relationships, which I'll get to in a second. But the point I want to make here, and this is an image of a compass. You know, a compass is always going to tell you what true north is. In a sense, that's what our vocation or calling does. It aligns our passions and our gifts and lets us know when we're on the right track. And it involves this process of discernment. It involves asking ourselves questions, and discernment is a communal practice. So the way that vocation's been understood in our culture has been very individualistic, and it has to do with my abilities and my capacity to fit myself in, get this training and get this job. And it can be very lonely at times, but discernment is a communal practice, meaning we do this in relationships. We do it in communities. And think about your communities of belonging. Think about your friends. Think about your family. Think about people who speak into your life in meaningful ways. Have conversations with them. And instead of saying, what's my job going to be when we think about vocation, ask questions like this, which I'm borrowing from Turpin and Walker's Nurturing Different Dreams, which was written for adolescents. They say, what breaks your heart about the world? What are you doing when you feel most alive? What are you doing when you feel most connected to other people? What moments have made you feel proud of what you're able to contribute to a group or project? See, these are different kinds of questions that are getting to what's alive in us and what are the needs in the world. Instead of having this idea of vocation is just this job that I'm training for that's going to give my life meaning, start asking these questions, and you find out that your vocation is a lot broader than you thought it was, because perhaps we need to move from vocation as a noun to thinking about vocation in terms of prepositions. So vocation as a noun is static. It's this singular entity. It's almost like it's already there and you have to find it. And it's our culture's way of understanding vocation, the job that you get that marks you as an adult. It's when you leave adolescence, which is becoming later. Adolescence is getting attenuated. And now we have early adulthood and all these different phases. And a lot of that has to do with the way we think about vocation or calling. But what if instead we think about vocation in terms of prepositions? What part of speech is a preposition? What's a preposition trying to do? It's about relationships. That's what prepositions are. And vocation or calling is best understood in terms of relationships. So let's think about that together for a second. Vocation and prepositions. So for me, as I say, I've been called by God in multiple ways. And what are some of those ways? Well, sometimes I've been called by the affirmations of other people. They've said, you seem to be really good at this. You should pursue this. Or you're really not very good at this. Maybe this isn't what your vocation is. But some of the things that you're called to do, then you get a vision for and you train and go do it. But some of the things you do, like I have a vocation as a husband because I'm married, and I've had to grow into that vocation or calling. And through that calling, I can participate in God's redemptive work in the world. I have 4 children, so I have a vocation as a parent. But that vocation changes over time as my relationships with my kids change, as they move from infants to children's to teens, now adults who are trying to discern their own adult vocations. But all throughout, I'm trying to help them see, as a parent, how are you being called by God now to make a difference? How's God going to use your life and your interests and your skill sets and your passions now to make this world the kind of world that God desires? I mentioned this next one. As a Christian, I'm called to be a follower of Christ, and that's a primary calling that I have, that I share with everybody else who claims to be a Christian. And the word for that is discipleship. But then we're called as we are. And this is a very important one as we talk about disability and vocation. If vocation is this noun, you have to have certain, it's this job, you have to have certain training and competencies, it's going to look like this. Vocation has been a very ableist concept. It's all about, it's been all about capacities that you have. And it's excluded many people from many vocations. And that's how our society is structured, so that institutions and systems and all these things are oriented such that if you have a disability, the only way to navigate that world is as a life hacker. I mean, and so people with disabilities become expert life hackers. So my friend Chris Klein, who wanted to be a pastor, felt a call to be a pastor, was affirmed in college that he had gifts to be a pastor, was going through seminary and was doing very well, went before a group who was going to ordain him. And the question he received from them is, how do you think you're going to be a pastor? Why did he receive this question? Well, he's a gentleman with cerebral palsy who uses a power wheelchair, and he uses augmented speech. And they thought, you don't have the capacity to do the tasks required to be a pastor. The problem is they didn't realize he was called as he was, and the lack of imagination was on their part. It wasn't a lack of capacity on his part. It was a lack of imagination on their part on what a pastor is and what it means to engage in pastoral responsibilities. We're called from people, places, and situations. Think how sometimes, these ruptures in your life that seem so tragic, that become part of our autobiographies of loss, are the very things that empower us for the callings that we have. A lot of times we're called out of something into something else. We're called to say no to something so we can say yes to something else. Most importantly, callings, vocation, it's relational. We're called with and through each other. It was a gentleman who was a quadriplegic who I met with once a week, who gave me a vision for being a pastor, which I'm not now, but I was for a little while. But I was called through his encouragement. And when I was going through school to become a pastor, I had mentors who spoke into my life, who I could ask questions of without fear of judgment or humiliation. And we need these people in our lives to discern our calling, to refine our sense of what it is that we're called to do in the world. And that is that we're called for service and roles and works. We're called for the flourishing of other people and the flourishing of all creation. And see, I haven't talked about job very much, because you do this in many different ways. We have many callings, not just one calling. We have primary callings and secondary callings. We're called in and through suffering, and importantly, because we're part of this community of calling and helping other people to refine their callings, we're called to attend to the callings of those around us. And that's been one of the most fun things about leading the Center for Disability and Ministry, and things like this Doctor of Ministry cohort, of which all but one student claimed disability. I get to enjoy watching them wrestle with their callings and attend to their callings and speak into their lives, and have them speak into my lives. So callings, vocation, it's relational, and it has a trajectory, the flourishing of all humankind and all of creation. And so we may feel like, okay, great, I have a lot of energy around this, and I've been supported by others, and I'm getting a vision for what it is I'm supposed to do. I have this internal sense of what I'm supposed to be in the world and how I'm supposed to execute my calling. But the problem is we do run into challenges. So callings are multiple and varied in your life, and they emerge in different ways. They emerge with different developmental tasks, like I was talking about with my children who move from infants to children to youth to young adults. Vocation isn't static or linear, it's dynamic. It's complex and multifaceted. And it's not determined once for all in our life. As we develop new relationships, we move to new places, we have new experiences, and all these things shape our vocation. So we can start to think about, how have these experiences and encounters made us a unique person that has something to offer to the world that no one else has? Because that is the case. There is no other you. And you have a vocation as part of a community, but your vocation is unique to you. How has your context shaped your calling? We're going to hear a whole lot about that from my friend Daniel in just a bit. But first, let's say you agree with everything I've said so far. Let's say you have a disability, and you're getting excited about what I'm saying, but then you realize, wait a second, there seems to be what Patrick Reyes has called a purpose gap. What is the purpose gap according to Reyes? Well, he writes from a Latino perspective. So he writes, with the goal of empowering communities of color to find meaning and thrive. That's his purpose in writing. And I highly recommend this text to you if you're trying to understand vocation. But everything that he says about communities of color and vocation, I found very challenging as I think through disability and vocation. He says that the gap is created because there's a distance between my internal convictions and sense of calling and my ability to execute it because of cultural perceptions, because of institutional structures, because of laws and the way they're enforced. Basically, he says if you look at texts on vocation, you aren't going to find anything written from the perspective of Black and brown people. It's all seems to be oriented towards white middle class people. And I completely agree with Reyes on that, but I'd like to add disability is another factor that creates this purpose gap. It's how a group of people who are responsible for ordaining ministers can look at somebody like my friend Chris Klein and listen to his wisdom and say, we don't think you can be a pastor. The purpose gap exposes a lack of imagination and a lack of desire on the part of other people to affirm what you know to be true about yourself and the world. So the purpose gap is challenging. And if somebody overcomes the purpose gap, says Patrick Reyes, that's great, but then that's just a star. And what we need is constellations. In other words, what we need is pathways for other people to bridge this purpose gap. And that's the exact kind of work that Daniel is considering. So as I've thought about vocation and disability, some different things have come to the forefront. One is I had an understanding of flourishing that was very middle class. But flourishing doesn't look the same for everybody. I had an idea of voice that it came by pretty easily for me. I don't have a lot of barriers. I mean, I have the ability to project my voice into academia and into the pulpit, into the academy. I said academy twice. How do you like that? But interestingly, my friend Miriam, who also has cerebral palsy, and it affects her speech. She says, when I give a presentation, I give text so that people can follow along with what I'm saying, but I'd rather they just listen to my voice, because what happens as I'm speaking is they move from passive listeners to active listeners. They have to listen more carefully, and they're brought into what she calls crip time. Crip time. So crip being a recovery of a word that was used negatively towards people with disabilities, being embraced by people with disabilities to say, look, we move through the world in a certain kind of way at crip speed. And if you're going to engage with me, you're going to have to attend to my crip voice and encrypt time. And that's part of her vocation, is that her movement and her voice creates spaces for encounter to happen where people can genuinely get to know each other and appreciate each other. Now, that capacity, instead of just being an ability, is an ability, but it's also a capaciousness. It's creating kind of space where people are welcome to engage one another. I had to learn about agency. What happens if you don't have this? What happens if you don't have agency? Can you still have a vocation? I say yes. I say a lot of times your vocation is then what you're evoking in other people. Your presence is your vocation. So it's not so much what you're doing, other than the doing is your being, and your being is your doing, and it has an impact on the way people gather and move and meet. That's a vocation. I had to learn about vulnerability from people who really experience vulnerability, and it moved it from a concept for me to more of a real life encounter. And then when we're talking about disability and vocation, justice has to be talked about. Reyes talks about how in Atlanta, even the way the roads are set up and public transportation is set up is not set up for the flourishing of Black and brown people. It's not set up to overcome the purpose gap. And so there have to be structural changes made in the name of justice to bridge that purpose gap. It can't be pointing to somebody who's overcome the gap and say, look, this person did it, you should be able to do it. But we have to deal with the structural issues as well, the attitudinal barriers, the structural barriers, the physical barriers. And finally, we have to rely on the wisdom of expert life hackers. If we're going to talk about disability and vocation, I can have a voice in the conversation, but that's it. I don't claim a disability. I haven't experienced the purpose gap. I don't have to be an expert life hacker. And so we have to rely on the wisdom of people who have the experience of disability. And we can't say, well, everyone's disabled, because while in a sense it's true, I mean, disability is the only open minority group that we're all going to enter at some point. But I've never faced discrimination in the same way somebody who has a visible disability has, or someone who has an intellectual or developmental disability has. So that everyone's disabled really isn't that helpful a concept. We can say everyone's limited. That's true. But disability comes along with a couple of things. It comes along with a unique embodied perspective that the world needs, but it also comes with challenges in a body that often betrays you and is in pain and needs rest and these sorts of things. So I want us to be honest about that. So that's my setup. And now I'd like to pass it on to my good friend, Dr. Daniel.
Hello. Being over. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for an amazing day. Wait. Okay. Hey, so, we talk about vocation and what we were talking about vocation and it's more a relationship. We cannot have a vocation outside of community. That because there is nobody who is that we're called to or that we're loving on. There is no vocation. If you don't have anybody who is listening to you speak, no matter how much, however you're speaking, if you don't have a healer, then you don't have a vocation. So, what I want to talk about today is how does all of this work? So how did we put this in a practical way that not only do we know what to do, but how to do it? Go to the next slide. Okay. Within my position, yeah, like with being I am a Christian and I grew up with this book effectively in my background. I grew up charismatic, and so we all know about all authority and get into me, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, teaching them also all I can make. Now, most of the time we will read this in church, there is a responsibility. There is most people know that the Great Commission that we are set out by Jesus to make disciples of all nations. And so it is a responsibility. And but when people will always be to me or beat you, some of my friends with disability, they will always say, well, God knows that you can't do everything in the world. Oh, you are, but you just need to live your life and do what you want to do. And you are, well, wait a minute. It's not in the Bible for a robot, but that's not just based on ability. It's based upon output, and no matter what ability you have, or what ability you don't have, or what race you are, if you're male or female, we'll all be in the same Bible, the same text, and it should be applied to everyone. The good thing that lie. Because the mission, like I just said, is not just for the able bodied, but we are all committed to go and make disciples of the we will eat apple. But how do we do that? How do we we're all committed to go? What you go and what you making look like? And again, being to us, not others, but I believe we can get more narrow or that a little bit. So go to the next one. This is a little old, it's a little more than that. But if we look at people with disability, I believe that it's a physical disability. Make 10% of the world and 15% of the United States. That is a whole nation of people. If you put 15% of the United States all together, that would be Chicago, New York. That is a lot of people. But where are we in the church? And before I know, say about many people, many will know about belonging and getting into the church, but where is the representation of my nation, of the people with the ability. I'm sorry. Okay. Not only are we got the self-development, but we're also called the family the same. Like that, all of it, it's not just able party. Everyone has a same responsibility to everybody. We're a community of people. So how can that community look next time? It looks like these are the full empowerment to release people with all different identities. But we have to bring them about ourselves and about that we're walking with at the same time. We have people with the ability have the ability. We have been created by God. Sorry, by God and by a higher power. Yeah, like my friend Ben has the also believe that I have been created by God. It's more do not believe that about the animal. The whole model will fall apart. Same with connected. We have to believe that we are all connected to God and to one another. And that connection cannot be broken. And my generation, I talk about in order to know God, I have to know the people around me because we all got creation. And I want to know about the creator. I have to know about the creation. And I got it all connection. I have to be connected to my community in order to be connected to God. We are all called. No matter who we are, we're called by God and by the people around us. Yeah, but there, it's not just a upward going, but a horizontal going. We get called by the people around us, but we have to respect both the horizontal and the vertical calling. Same with commission. We are all commissioned both to one another and to God. on a side note, when you believe that you are created and you are connected and you are called and you are committed, we can imagine and dream together about what that looks like for anybody, regardless of the ability. You create it by God in order to create. You are connected to God in order to connect. The same with God and commitment. The reason why we're called is so that we can call for the people around us. The reason why we are sent out is so that we can send out others among us. So go to the next slide. Created. We are created in the image of God. And we find it in the book and obedience to the answer that God created us. Not only did He create us, but He delighted in our creation. For me, I tell people all the time that God didn't just create me the way I am. I believe that God created me with that authority because it brought Him the light to do so. I mean, the Bible is clear about how He looked at a creation and called it good. So when He looked at our friends, when there is the ability, He called it good. And in all of us to pursue the community of all working together, we have to begin to lay down our precept, lay down our thinking of what is good and what not good. Because the only person that can declare something good is the one who created that thing or that piece of art or that function. So, okay, go ahead. We are connected. We went in and talk about the body, how we are all one body and member of that body. The end is in need of the letting the I need the I and so we're all connected. I need my able body brother and sister, but at it ain't down. Much I need them, they need me also, and that is that is what is about foundation to the model that we have to begin to realize how much we need each other. Yeah, and my with me, God. Yeah, and my with me, God. Next slide. We are called, being talk a little bit about the idea of that we are all God, not just young one but we're all going to be who we are and more and then they do talk about being called into the church and and we are all called to, but we have there have been people in the disability community in leadership in order for it to be a whole community. It will not in the imagine the the church that is a more that able body church that have people in leadership leading, but all that have to be young people who are able body who are following it's important to go both ways. Yeah. I think we got a bit in the beginning, but we are all mentioned. Like I said, we all have a bit about ability to love one another, to serve our community, and to make example or to make you all one another. And go to the next slide. And then I was met your we participate with me. We all participate with each other. Like living among angels from one another. Again, when I was working on my day about vocation, one of the idea I use the idea of the blues and the blues me and one of the interesting thing about blues me is the it the blue is something that you feel, something that you feel it a story. And the way you learn the blues, you don't learn it by sitting down and go and put a classroom or a book, but the way you learn the blues is you sit down and you watch, and then you do. So you 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 wait, you feel, and then you do. And it a feeling, it in the moment thing, and that what it means to participate with one another. I have to get into my community and live life and what they're all about and learn from one another. And what we do that, we can cultivate the gifts in one another. This is what we were talking about by people saying, you know, you should be a better, or you're really good at this, or you're really bad at this. You can't do but there's there to encourage and the more and the water for it cultivate. That's what it comes from. It comes from watering something grow out of the ground. And you water and you change it and you encourage it. And we all think that the what is how do I encourage the people around me, no matter what their ability is, or and how do I allow them to encourage me? And then we go to activate and what does it look like as taking someone out? What does it look like the okay, it's time for you to go. We confirm that this is what God is doing in your life. Now go. And we have to activate in okay, and that is all. This is the way it should look. I mean, you got your foundation. If we feel in a city with, if you know me that about what that is, but if we're gonna build a apartment building, well, the idea that we are all creating, that is the foundation. And if we look at we are all God and connected, those are the walls of the building. But then if we really believe that we are all commissioned and that we are all part of that great commission that Jesus talked about, then we're going to put on a roof, we're going to participate, and we're going to cultivate with one another. And I overdo that, then we're going to activate one another. And what does that mean to activate? It means to allow people, no matter what their ability is, to go out and build a building of their own. They go out and teach somebody the same model. And then we more about it. So, like, for me, I use my children, but my children book are talking about every one of these every when I do a play, I'm reminding people that God created me and them. It outwardly a question of the model, and you let it out in your daily walk, and that how it becomes a more vocation over time. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. If people can stay on, I know we are at 3 o'clock, but if people can stay on and we can answer a few questions, Ben and Daniel, are you available for a few more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Martin. He asks, his question is, how do we see Christ in the disabled?
I'd answer that by saying the same way we see Christ in anyone else. I mean, as we get to know people, we see Christ come through them. And so disability is just a category for talking about a kind of difference that's often related to an impairment. And these impairments don't impair us from being able to embody Christ's presence in the world. And I think we're only disabled from doing that when we're not included. So it's in attending to people and getting to know them that question gets answered on a very individual level. Otherwise, we start to infantilize people with disabilities and say they have super magic powers or something like that, when in truth, people with disabilities can be joyful, sad, kind, jerks, all those sorts of things. So it's the same Holy Spirit that is indiscriminate in who the Spirit embodies and grows Christ-like fruit in.
Yeah, so those of us with disabilities aren't giftless. It's just so yeah, absolutely. I like that. It just means there are certain things we might not be able to do, or we do in a different way.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Or Daniel, if you have anything to add to that question, please, people can put that in the questions in the chat or the Q&A, either way.
Oh, well, I just was gonna say that one of the things that I always think about is somebody told me you cannot break bread with somebody who you are not breaking Peter with during the week. So I cannot see God in you unless I get to know you. Like, it's not a thing of, like that that out is what I have to get to know who you are. You know, when I talk about mystery and how I love mystery, in my mind, I'm thinking about the people I see faking of what I'm talking about when I say it's not just a point of I just got in about it people I know.
Right? You have to get to know the person in order to see
Yeah,
God in them. Absolutely. And that goes for anybody,
yeah,
disabled or not. You
Yeah.
gotta get to know them. Absolutely. Any other questions? As you type those in, I'll share a little bit more information. Again, this will be recorded and it will be on our YouTube and then also on our website. We will I will actually send an email to you all when it is up on our website. It might take a few weeks, but it will be up on our website. I will also send an email with all of the slides that you saw on this presentation. I'll give you a PDF copy of those slides as well. Lisa Heffernan, actually in 2 months, one of our speakers, she says, I don't have a specific question, but I wanted to thank you for this time today. It's great to see further collaboration with our cohort. Absolutely, Lisa. For those of you who all don't know, Lisa, Daniel, Ben, and I are all, Ben is actually our professor in the disability and ministry cohort. Daniel graduated early. So we have a few friends here on this call. Stephanie says, thank you, very helpful. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, again, if you don't, I will also put in my email. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email me and I can get them to either Daniel or Ben if you have questions for them as well. Thank you all for being here and take care. Ben and Daniel, if you can hang on, I'll talk to you in a little bit. But thank you all for being here.